welcome to episode 712 of Longbox Heroes, the Lamborghini of Comic Book Podcast. I'm Todd, along with Joe. How we doing today, Joe?
I know it was last week, but I'm going to bring it up this week, just so it's not like a thing. But last week was episode 711. When you replied to the email, you purposely put a dash in there to make it 711.
Yeah, that was not a mistake, yeah.
Right, like that was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when we used to have a 7-Eleven in our neck of the woods?
I vaguely do. I remember when we had a Wawa.
Yeah.
And you're down your neck of the woods more.
Yeah, and then that went away. Now Wawa's come back around, so now we're getting a Wawa. They just tore down the Kmart this past week.
Right, and we're getting a Wawa up my way, too.
Yeah. That was actually supposed to open up November, and they kept pushing it off.
They were getting it in for gobbler time.
Yeah, but like previously, the closest, we had one actually was in downtown Scranton, or like near downtown Scranton.
Yep.
And they flipped. Was that?
Just say, go ahead.
They flipped it over to a convenient, which I think is still a convenient today.
Right.
And then the closest ones that we had after that was like outside Philly, but now on the Turnpike that they flipped the convenient marts in the Turnpike Northeast Extension to 7-Elevens. Like technically we have them close. Right.
Couple of things. 7-Eleven in Philly used to go over there after the Philadelphia cons drunk and get hard-boiled eggs to eat at 11 o'clock in the morning and hand out Green Lantern rings. That's an epic story that I won't completely go into. Wawa, the last time I was in a Wawa was when I went to see the Rolling Stones last week, and we stopped in Jersey to go into Wawa. Joe, I will tell you this, outside the Wawa, it stunk like garbage because I think we were near a landfill. Or that's right, we were in Jersey. That's what it was. So that stunk. But do you remember when there was a different Krispy Kreme downtown in Scranton? Not the one over by like the restaurant there by 81. There was one actually over like almost just outside of downtown Scranton.
It was on Main Street. Are you talking about the one that was in the bank?
No, the one that was down more, like if you come up Mulberry Street, you come across the bridge on Mulberry Street coming into Scranton, you would turn left and it would be a block or two down that way.
No, I don't remember that one.
I remember a Krispy Kreme down there, and it was like all it was the Krispy Kreme and the coffee bar that you would sit at with the stools and maybe one or two tables. There wasn't a lot of room to sit. It was just more of and this had to be when I was 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a Krispy Kreme Mandela effect.
Maybe.
That's neither. And I can't find any proof of it, but I'm still on the lookout.
Now when we're done, I'm going to look for the proof of that.
And there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you are the guy who knows all about Krispy Kreme, so.
I do. I'm excited. I'm probably going to get myself a Krispy Kreme donut when I go pick up my comics tomorrow.
There you go. See, it all comes around, Joe.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what do we got for the show this week, Todd?
A slender read of news. Promotions for retailers like tiers and themed covers. Someone who's getting themed covers is bringing back one of their own creator-owned properties. And an update on a reprint collection and how many times it may or may not be printed, Joe.
Oh, boy.
I think we're going to have a giant-sized The Rob Watch, but we'll see as it goes on. Conventions. What we read last week, which is only one book, which is Nightwing 114. What we are looking forward to this week. Todd and Joe have issues where we reread Gail Simone's Secret Six in its entirety. And this week it's issue 5 of the volume 3 of Secret Six. And finally, we're going to have spoiler-filled talk of the latest episode of Doctor Who, which is 73 yards, Joe.
I'm going to save all my thoughts for that at the end of the show.
That's what we usually do, unless you have to get them out here, Joe.
No, I don't have to get them out here.
Okay.
I'll be able to stifle myself. So, a lot of DC news, as you mentioned. Marvel, not so much these days. But what DC is doing for the upcoming summer crossover Absolute Power by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. is they're giving incentives not only for different variant covers to retailers, but as long as you order the tie-in book, or the main book, the Absolute Power book, and the other tie-in books and the stuff that it crosses over with, along with the levels of those books previously, like Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman and stuff like that, and of course World's Finest as well, that they'll allow you to buy additional copies of the main book for super cheap. I think it's like bundles of 25 for $25, which again is I'm sure way below cost of what it would be for the real retailers to be getting a book like that I think has a $5 or $6 cover price.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's definitely a deal for retailers.
Yes. So I like when DC does these sort of things. I like when any company does these sort of things to put support behind a event book. And, Todd and I are just recently, within the last couple of years, gotten back into the event books, specifically the DC event books. And even if we weren't into the DC event books, something that was being wholly written by Mark Waid with art by Dan Mora, arguably the best working artist today.
The hardest working artist in show business.
Yes. So even if we had not gotten bit by Night Terrors and the Titans crossover that was done by Tom Taylor, what was it, Beast World or whatever it was. I don't know. It's a good creative team, and it seems as though DC is trying. They're going to work hard to get these on shelves and make sure people get them. Now, it's one thing to get them to be incentivized for retailers. It's another thing for DC to work with the retailers to make people actually want to buy these books.
True, but I wonder if you can, with that price for retailers, that they could get those books in people's hands for a sweeter deal, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Sure, if you're not paying, it's this is a $6 book, but because we have some of these, give them to people who might not try it. Be all right, I'm not going to give you all of them for $3, but here, try the first one. Get that taste for free and see if I can addict you,
Yeah.
But all joking aside, maybe it would a price point that would move them for people who normally wouldn't try them.
Absolutely. More stuff DC rolled out this past weekend. It was at the MCM London Comic-Con. And again, we don't really talk about the overseas, outside of the USA, comic book conventions all that much. We're very locally minded when it comes to the conventions, because then it could just be getting an unwieldy segment. But like I said, DC ended up having a big presence at this one, showing off something that we had talked about a while ago, those DC's finest super cheap collections. Mm-hmm. Doing them character-based, like a Superman, a Batman, a Wonder Woman, a Catwoman, and a Flash. They announced that they're going to be doing event-tiered ones. Obviously, rolling out the first one being a 0 Hour one, being that this year is the 30th anniversary of 0 Hour, and they have the release schedule for those starting in June until the end of the year. And one of the other things that they're doing is, we're going to talk about this a little bit when we get into talking about Secret Six. And it's not something that DC does across all of their books, unfortunately. It's something that they do across a couple of their books. And Marvel does it too, but I like DC's a lot better when they do them. I think, is it August? They're doing the variant covers that look like figure packaging of the old Superpowers action figures.
Right, which Marvel did with the Star Wars figures and stuff like that. And they did the the Secret War figures.
Yeah, and they did Secret Wars ones and stuff like that, but there's something about the Secret Power one, or the Superpower ones, that just look so cool,
I agree. The Superpowers were just beyond my actual, as a kid, buying toy era. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get any of them. I only collected a few that piqued my interest, but I am a sucker. And the fact that they brought the figures kind of back in the smaller legend versions, I'm a big fan.
And then with doing a themed thing like that, they'll have that, and then October's going to have Halloween, and December's going to have Christmas, whatever. But then the alternating months, the odd numbered months, they're going to be doing artist spotlight months.
Right.
Where they're just going to be letting an artist do a bunch of variant covers. And one of the first one that's coming up is an artist that we've been talking about every week on the show for this year, and that's Nicola Scott.
Yes. Those are going to look good.
Yeah, they're going to look awesome, and I think that's super cool of DC. And again, Nicola Scott is not like a superstar artist. She absolutely should be. Mm-hmm. But the fact that DC is, saying, like, we're going to tap her to do a theme month of variant covers for our books is, like, that's pretty cool.
Right, to kick it off almost,
Yeah, for sure. So that's really cool. And that's going to be one of those things where I might spring the extra like $1 or whatever it is, because usually that's the other thing that DC does. And again, I could gripe and grouse about that. Is typically the variant covers are on the cardstock covers, which are $1 extra.
Right. And
usually once if I decide I'm going to start with the cardstock covers, I'm going to stick with the cardstock covers. If I stick with the normal covers, I'm going to stay with the normal covers. I don't like having that variance. Because that's the kind of OCD that I have, not the one where I can't clean up after myself.
Right.
Which is a different OCD that only one guy has. But anyway, cool for Nicola Scott. Was there anything else out of the London Comic-Con thing there that struck your interest or anything like that?
No, only on the artist tiered covers. I think that's great because some artist is going to get paid for 20 covers that month.
Yeah.
So good for them. But that being said, they should never, ever, ever, for my wallet's sake, give one to Kevin Maguire. Because then I'll have to get all the covers, whether or not I collect the books and or not. So I'm hoping they don't do that. But
he did the one for Blue Beetle a couple months ago as the Salty Keith homage.
But that's one book. But if you're going to do a month where they get to do all the covers... That's going to hurt, Joe. That's going to hurt. So what would you say the second month is going to be, Kevin? Joe,
they haven't announced who the second month is yet.
But to get Todd hurt, it's who it's going to be.
Exactly.
Oh, you know what? If it is Kevin, he's going to need 18 months to do those covers. So
they needed to give Kevin the Iggy on this a year ago.
Yes. So they'll have to give him the Iggy now. They'll have to, let's just make the appointment for him 11 months out for his covers, Joe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy. So lastly but not leastly with DC, we had talked a couple months ago about them doing the DC Marvel Amalgam crossover omnibuses.
Mm-hmm.
And we then talked about them getting delayed.
Right.
Now they're not coming out until late September. But apparently there was stuff going around at the aforementioned London Comic-Con this past weekend with the Diamond retailers, at least, that they're only going to do one print of this.
Right. Not endless.
Right. So as a certain podcast says, the pre-order is the order.
Okay.
So with them moving the goalpost on when the cutoff is for that because it's late, if you were on the fence about it, you ain't getting a second printing. And hopefully DC has straightened things out and they don't have to do a second printing because the first printing is an error.
Right. I got the email for this story while I was at our local comic shop. Yeah. And young Josh was working. So I said, Josh, it looks like, I laid all this out. It looks like that there's going to be only one printing. So I'm going to be investing in Amalgam Omnibus futures. So could I have 20 of each? And he looked at me for a second and he's like, You're joking, right? I'm like, yes, I'm joking. I'm not buying 20 each of $150 Omnibuy. And then I said, that being said, you should do it, Josh. And he said no. To invest in his future, he's not going to do it.
I pulled the, when you're telling a joke, ring a bell or something on my kid this week. And he got all upset at me.
Of course he did, because you're a jerk.
Yeah, that's true. I am a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, but not leastly, in the news section, someone who is not a jerk. Two people who are not jerks, and that would be Mark Russell and Roberto Melli. We had talked last week that through Ablaze, they're doing the Kickstarter to do the fancy trade hardcover slipcase, etc. edition of Traveling to Mars, which is a book that we loved over the course of 2023, finishing up in 2024. Books are late, it happens. The Kickstarter just went live today, and they had a modest goal of $6,000, and they're at 9,500 currently.
That's more than $6,000, Joe.
That is definitely more than $6,000. And like I said, if you missed out on this for whatever reason, obviously you can get the full run digitally for $15, which again, 11 issues, $15, whatever. The special edition soft cover is $24. The hardcover is $40. And a lot of times with these Kickstarters, you could do gimmicks where you could add on some of the additional accoutrements from the higher levels, and it goes all the way up to a $240 level, where you get the digital, you get the signed and number plate, you get the T-shirt, you get an acrylic stand, and you get an original sketch by Roberto Melli.
Right.
And, obviously, if you're crunching the numbers on everything, $15 for the digital run, $40 for, whatever. And then we add all those tiers up, you're practically getting the sketch for free.
Yeah. Like, I know my art monies, and that's a free sketch almost.
Yeah, I was going to say, I talked to an art person earlier before we started recording, and that's what they said.
Mm-hmm. They know their stuff.
But I'll have the link to this in the show notes until the campaign is done. It'll be good for a month, but like I said, this I would feel confident in backing this project if this is something that you definitely wanted to check out. As I mentioned, it was one of our favorite books of the year. So,
yep.
Yeah, and because they hit their goal, they'll probably maybe adding more and more stuff as things go on.
Well, I just see there's a $320 tier too.
Oh, I didn't see the $320.
That's the platinum slipcase edition.
Oh, okay. No sketch though, right?
No, it comes with a sketch.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they added other stuff. And I like the fact that it comes with the acrylic stand. That's my favorite, so you could display it. A sucker for stands. I'm a stand for stands, Joe.
Oh, my goodness. But you're not a stand for Stan?
No. Well, Malibu, maybe.
And there you go.
Ask not for whom the rob trolls. The rob trolls for thee. And now, the Rob Watch.
Now, somebody else owed a week. That would be the Rob.
Yeah.
Now, again, I've been avoiding some stuff with the Rob lately because, it's the Rob. But if you're in the soon-to-be-named network Discord, you're Patreon member, you're in there, whether it be Patreon member of this show or Add-Outs with Wrestling or, by other means, of course, you can get in there. You're a host of one of the other shows, of course. There's been some discussion, and something has been coming up a lot lately in what's called a Facebook group called Comic Swipes, where they will take a cover or a piece of art and say, like, oh, here's this, and here's that, and obviously this person, they're saying this person ripped this person off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, obviously maybe there's a gray area, maybe there's not, and certainly seemed like somebody who was being targeted, maybe because there was a lot of ammunition to do so, was the Rob, okay? Mm-hmm. And I just did learn this week that the guy who runs, and it's a pretty big Facebook group, if you're into Facebook groups, the Comic Swipes Facebook group, that the guy who runs that group is a former business partner of the Rob. So, again, be wary of the things that you say about the Rob when you're in a group that's run by a friend of his.
Right.
So Friday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, bear in mind, 8 o'clock Eastern, Rob's West Coast. Rob posts this in his group. The thing about swipes. Considering some of the discussion going back and forth, I wanted to share how swipes evolved since I was a kid. First, everybody swipes, and they always have. Somebody, even your sacred cow, has done it. For 99%, and again, I'm reading this as Rob wrote it. If there's grammatic errors, I apologize. For 99%, they intend it as an homage. 99% of them, especially anything that I've done, was intended to draw the comparison, not pass off as, hey, look at the original. Wait, what do you mean it looks like the other thing? My most famous swipes and homage, Frank Miller, George Perez, were when I was the best-selling comic of each month. It was a way of me doing a cover version of a favorite shot by artists I was fond of and knew personally. The internet has corrupted intent. It presents swipes as soulless theft. My favorites swiped and homaged. John Byrne, Walt Simonson, Frank Miller, George Perez. But when my age did it, we were thieves and the intent was deemed sinister. Now, in between that post and one that he would put up at about 4:30 Eastern time that same day, again, like I said, Rob is on Pacific time, I can't read that post because it's profanity-laced and it's accusatory in tone to maybe one or two people in particular.
Right.
Okay? Like, I can't even clean it up. He then follows it up with a post that says, "This group was designed to be fun. Please don't condescend or bring all your horrible assumptions into our vibes. Work your baggage out elsewhere." Now, I will say, I did see a tweet over the weekend that screen capped that Facebook message saying he's right. There's this one guy in the group constantly attacking other members, bulldozing them with pride, name-calling, accusing everyone of not being as knowledgeable as him, as misinformed. If he left the group, it'd be a much better group.
Ooh. Shots fired.
So then, of course, with all the hotness and everything else there, the Rob gets inspired. This week's podcast is going to be about swipes.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts a post up Saturday morning, again, 8 o'clock. Rob's on Eastern time. That says, "Help me out here, as some of you are much quicker with the memory work." Caveat: he regularly chastises people for not knowing the entire history of comic back and forth before posting. Anyway, who was doing the Rob style at Marvel or the big two in the 90s? Not Extreme Studio guys. Guys outside who adopted the look. I have a couple names. Who do you recall? And that post got not a lot of traction because, again, Rob is very quick to condemn and criticize and so forth. 2 hours later, he edited the post to add, "Zero condemnation, no judging, just seeing if there's any names outside of my scope."
No judging for now.
No, between me and you, this really felt like the Rob saying, "Do my research for my podcast, because I'm too lazy."
Yeah, and then nobody would do his research because they were afraid they were going to write something and get yelled at.
Or banned from the group, or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that he regularly does. Like, somebody earlier today posted in the group of like, "Hey, Rob, just wondering, obviously you're the great creator of Cable and Deadpool. What are some of your favorite stories not written or drawn by you by Cable or Deadpool?" And he replies, "None of them. I don't like any of them."
Very gracious. That was very gracious of the Rob.
Now, I did listen to the podcast. I do a full write-up. It's over on longboxheroes.com. It's under the Robster Recaps. I'm going to get back to the 9 stories that shaped the 90s eventually. You know, it's only 3 months old at this point, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I got some time off this week. Maybe that's what I'll do instead of going in my pool and enjoying the nice weather. But anyway, the big thing that the Rob puts out on the show this week is, like, he cites examples of, like, a Thor cover that Jack Kirby did, which in and of itself was Jack Kirby, homaging himself. And then Walt Simonson did it. And nobody put on, like, Walt Simonson didn't put on the Thor cover after Kirby, or didn't give acknowledgement to Kirby, because Rob goes to movies and says George Lucas admits that there's shots in the original Star Wars movie from 1976 that he stole from World War II footage. And there's a Star Wars documentary where they lay the footage right over the footage from Star Wars, and they see that it's exactly what it is. And there's a Kurosawa movie where there's characters and themes and so forth that George Lucas admits that he liberally took to put in Star Wars. Spielberg, Coppola, Scorsese, these are people that have admitted that they were greatly influenced by the works and the Westerns of John Ford, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Rob says, if you don't call them thieves, you can't call me a thief, essentially is what the gist of the podcast was this week.
Right.
Because he did put the credits in there, like specifically cites, there's 2 Frank Miller things from the Ronin book that he put in New Mutants 100.
Mm-hmm.
One, he says everyone knew these shots were from Ronin, and they would know that I was doing it as an homage to Frank Miller, not ripping Frank Miller off.
Mm-hmm.
And I did put in those panels accreditations to say after Miller, and the editor made me take them out.
Right. So he's free and clear of any, being blamed for it.
And I get it. I'll give Rob a pass on those ones. Okay?
Now, but do we know for a fact that the editor did do that?
Okay. This is the same thing where somebody who's mentioning like what Marvel or Big Two Guys did the Liefeld style, and people were talking about Herb Trimpe had to do the Rob style at Fantastic Four, right?
Right. I had heard a rumor that he was just trying to emulate the Rob style because he loved it so much, and that he even went on to tell the Rob that.
Right. Just like on the podcast this week, the Rob mentions that the guy who was in charge of licensing at Lucasfilm contacted the Rob to get the Rob to do art for one of the Star Wars trading card sets that the Rob never ends up doing, specifically because Lucas was such a big fan of the Rob's work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to give the Rob a pass on all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm not going to give the Rob a pass on?
What?
The 7 years in between him ripping off whole cloth designs from Bubblegum Crisis.
Whoa.
I'm not going to give the Rob a pass of him ripping off designs from a little-known Sega Saturn game, and the Rob hand-waving it saying, I don't play video games, I ripped these off from Hellraiser. Even though there's like stylistic choices with like things over characters' belly buttons or the shapes of their buttresses that are right out of the manual of the game from the Sega Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the Rob will be addressing those on part 2 of the podcast this week.
Right. That bubblegum one is ridiculous.
It's one of the most egregious rips. And that's what people... And again, I'm giving the Rob the benefit of the doubt, and the Rob is correct. Obviously, people aren't going to pile on George Perez or Walt Simonson or Jack Kirby. One, because, 80% of these people are dead. But 2, they're not jerks online.
Mm-hmm.
And their art is really good. Oh, and the other thing. The Rob also mentions, and I got no problem. And another thing that Comic Swipes people is like, okay, the Rob, every single one of his covers is the same pose. It's the lead character in this very specific legs and knees bent pose. Sometimes he reverses it, but it's the same pose, and it's always with like 4 or 5 heads of the characters behind them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's every single one of the Rob's covers that he does all the time now.
Okay.
Or when the Rob does the homage to the New Mutants 98 cover.
Right.
Which, in and of itself, is a ripoff of a Steve Englehart cover. Not directly, but thematically, and the Rob, claims that it's not, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, the Rob says he only does those covers like that because the editors tell him to do that. And the Rob, he's kind of the guy that kowtows to editors and does what they tell him to do, right?
Right.
I'm not going to get into the Rob not getting his own timetable of him being in the comic industry for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
Even though his first published work was a fan pinup in Boris the Bear in 1987. Again, there's things I'll give the Rob. I'll give a pass on those things. But that Bubblegum Crisis and the rip-off of the designs in those Sega Saturn games are two of the most egregious. And
right.
the Bubblegum Crisis one, he just ignores. Doesn't even address it. And I'll say this. Part 2 of this comes out on Friday. The Rob said that it's going to be more so on, themes, which is the post where he was like, hey, go find the people who ripped off my style at Marvel and DC so I could talk about them on my podcast. If on that episode of the podcast, the Rob brings up the Sega Saturn game that he ripped off and the Bubblegum Crisis art that he ripped off, I'll come on here next week and I'll eat my John Cena hat.
Right.
But I'll say this. I got a feeling I ain't going to be eating a John Cena hat next week.
I like your odds, Joe.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do. Now, I will say this because, you know what? You often don't hear me defend the Rob, right?
Okay.
But, when he talks about... And I'm not saying he's going to do what the editors say, but I have no, and this is me, I would be a hypocrite if I said the Rob does his same pose over and over and over again with the floating heads around him, however you talk about, and then go, that's stupid. How could he keep doing that over and over again? But then see Kevin do the JLI cover 78 times in his career. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what people want to see. And I have no problem if the Rob fans, they like that pose over and over and over and over again. But my problem, with the Rob is when you see the stuff that he blatantly, yes, George Perez did it. Yes, Jack Kirby did it. Yeah, Walt Simons, but they didn't make a living out of it. Do you know what I mean? Where a lot of times you'll see the Rob and it's giant chunks of an issue will be swipes or homages or whatever. And it's well, just do your, you know what I mean? Or he'll just do the same thing. All right, a cover's one thing that's famous, but to do the same poses and the same layouts in the comic over and over again, that's lazy and that's a swipe in my mind. I don't know. It's a very weird subject because people need to define what an homage and what a swipe is, because that's one of the things that he gets hung up on. And I know I'm easily distracted on definitions, because I have a definition in my head and it's if we don't have the same definition, we're never going to get anywhere, if that makes any sense.
Right, and that's a lot of what the Rob gets into as well. Now, granted, again, we're talking about this. You said it was going to be a supersized, the Rob. And the Rob, gets into swipe and homage and everything else like that. And the Rob gets a little too literal, where he literally just reads the definitions of those words out of the dictionary.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. I get you.
But like I said, read my write-up if you can't deal with the Rob. And I get it if you can't. I'm fascinated by the Rob. I'm a Rob understander from afar, maybe.
Right. I'll just say this.
Yeah.
What I distract myself with, and this, especially around this time with him, is, I'm just going to go see a May movie and take my mind off it, Joe.
You mean a summer movie?
Yes, a summer movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you could do definitely this weekend, because it is May into June, is go to some conventions this weekend. We have the Nashville Comic-Con in Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
Tom DeFalco, the architect of the Spider-Clone saga, is going to be there.
Oh.
Coming up on the 30th anniversary of that. Robert Venditti is going to be there, and Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor are going to be there as well.
Always two great people to talk to at a show.
Yes. Three Rivers Convention in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, kind of taken a little bit away from the normal Steel City Comic Con, which has completely gone away from comic book folks. And they're all just like completely like media guests or whatever it is. So Three Rivers Con starting up anew. They got some named folks that are going to be there. Franco of Art and Franco fame is going to be there. Larry Stroman, Mike McCone, Ron Friends, and CB Cebulski is going to be there. Who's wow. Yeah, like he don't do conventions. He's about as big as it gets in editorial at Marvel today. So I don't know, if you're in the Pittsburgh area and you got a pitch and you're looking for work, I don't know, go bother him in person, right?
Right.
Also, this weekend, if you're in the Midwest area, specifically Sandusky, Ohio, Colossal Con is going on. Now, this is more of an anime cosplay convention, but Young Ed is going to be there. So if you want to go say hi to Young Ed, just look for the cat girl who wants to play D&D, and that's Young Ed.
There you go.
But all the links to all of these are going to be in the show notes, along with information about the soon-to-be-named network at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. You know what? We're talking. It's been a while. This is going to prompt me on, like I said, I got some time this week, so I'm going to go bother Jeremy, formerly of Fresher and Parlance, to see if he can get soon-to-be-named network working, because it's still not working right now. Okay. But I'm going to ping him tomorrow and just say, like, hey, we got an update on this. I emailed you a month ago.
Right.
Just to see how that's going. But anytime any of the shows in the soon-to-be-named network go live, of course, you can find them at their own individual websites. You can get them through the podcatcher of choice that you use. But also you could find them at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. And, of course, anytime they appear on any other outside network shows and they let me know that they are, you'll also be able to find them there so you can keep track of your favorite soon-to-be-named network personalities wherever they may be popping up.
Right.
Check out some of our friends in and around the internet and the stuff that they are up to. Go check out Mike Sterling's blog over at progressiveruin.com. Go check out our friend Kevin's blog, HellionsTeam.com. Go check out Rick Williams' The Chop Shop at freekaratechops.storeenvy.com. Go check out Jason Sandberg's Jupiter, a la carte Indiegogo. We were talking before about traveling to Mars. You can get the first issue of Jupiter, everything collected, and there's all sorts of accoutrements, add-ons, and so forth, or just buy the issue. It's still up there. Jason would be very happy if you purchased that. We were happy to have Jason on the show. We were happy to support him. He supports us. That's how these sort of things work. Go check out Chris Runt's Battle Monsters over at fortressofcomicnews.com. Our friend Davey of the band Cave People, he has his own self-published comics over at cavedomaincomics.com. Obviously, everything is available there digitally, no problem. And I know for sure Keeper and Mending are available in print. What's the other one? I forget the other one that's only available digitally now.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. But definitely go support Davey. If he's playing a concert in your area, go check out Cave People stuff. He should cross over the Cave People stuff with the Cave Domain comic stuff.
Yeah, I don't understand. I think there was a reason for the name changes, but I forget when he told me.
He should do a rock and roll style comic book about his own rock and roll band.
Oh, revolutionary comics, but like modern times.
I could be the Hart D. Fisher of his world.
Oh, boy.
But speaking of comics, if you do not have a comic book store in your area or you do not have a good comic book store in your area, let our store be your store. Comics on the Green. We have the Facebook page linked up here. Going to let you know store hours. Going to let you know when the new books are in for the week. Going to let you know if there's any delays. Going to let you know when those final order cutoffs are for any of the hottest and latest upcoming books to be ready for. Sign up for the mail order subscription service, whether you get your book sent to you weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. If you do, there's a chance that you can get a sketch on the package from our good friend Beckie, who we're going to turn things over to now for my walk down Lois Lane.
Welcome back to my walk down Lois Lane. Last week, we talked about the infamous 106, the comic that is in the American History Museum. How's that for a fun fact? So, because DC received a ton of positive feedback from 106, they decided to revisit these characters. Here is issue 114 from 1971. Again, a quick disclaimer. It was a different time. This is a wee bit tone deaf. I'm going to be as sensitive as I can when talking about it. So let's dive in. Perry calls Lois into his office. He's been reading a paper written and published from Metropolis' Little Africa and would like Lois to find the journalist to see if they want to work for him. Lois travels downtown and finds her friend Dave Stevens from 106. He is the writer along with his friend Tina, who hates Lois immediately for being pretty and, honestly, being white. Lois can tell Tina is secretly in love with Dave, and while she may have given Dave her blood in the last issue, she gives Tina her sympathy now. Outside, the 100 gang are causing trouble in the neighborhood. Thorne is there fighting them, and before Dave and Lois can get to her, she's gone. Dave said he doesn't need female heroes, and Lois points out that women fought in World War II, and he shouldn't be judging her gender when she doesn't judge his appearance. Dave and Lois go to a protest. The 100 gang and some guys want to tear down apartments for offices, forcing people from their homes. The community plan a peaceful protest, but it quickly turns violent until Thorne shows up. It's not going well, and Superman finally appears. He tells everybody he's not putting up with this. He says we're building an office, we're not demolishing any apartments, and they're going to have a nice little place in the neighborhood to gather. He builds everything, tells everyone to knock it off, and then gives Lois the old, I gotta fly halfway around the world, see you later, leaving everybody to celebrate. They have a party and decide the new place Superman built will have a center where people can come to learn Black history. The comic then has this really nice double-page spread with Dave and Tina and pictures of famous Black people and their accomplishments throughout history. At the party, someone has started a fire, and Lois tries to put it out with her bare hands. As she runs for water, she sees it's the 100 gang trying to burn down the community center, with Thorne fighting them. Thorne wins, and Lois is taken to the hospital by Dave and Tina. Tina sees all the effort Lois has put into helping them and changes her mind about her. Dave then agrees to become the first Black writer of the Daily Planet. So Dave and Tina go on to become series regulars before Lois's end in 1974. Lois also has 3 roommates of the Archie girlfriend variety. That's a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. They don't do anything. They just wanted to have more single independent women in the comics. They literally just stand there. So I don't even want to talk about them. And so besides the Black community, DC decided to try and tackle another hot button issue, and it is by far their most tone-deaf idea. So tune in next week and I will tell you about it.
Thank you very much, Becky. And of course, that this week was a follow-up to last week, one of the most notorious issues of the Lois Lane comic books. And not to spoil too much of what's coming up in the next couple of weeks with some of these things, but Becky ends up getting into some of my favorite stuff, which is sales figures.
Oh, boy.
And it's very interesting to see how these things are going to pan out over the next couple issues that we end up talking about, the next couple weeks of my walk down Lois Lane.
Right, should be a fun time. And I'm glad we got to revisit Little Africa, so your favorite part of Metropolis, Joe.
But, and again, it's crazy to think that it took until, at least in the comics, 1971, for them to write into a made-up story for kids that they have their first Black writer at the Daily Planet.
Yeah, I mean, oh, man, crazy. Forced inclusion, Joe. No, I mean, but yeah, it's just that it took that long, and I would have never really even thought about it, without this. But that's really cool. Right.
So let's get into what we read from this past week. We just heard Becky talk about Lois Lane issue 114. I think you and I are going to be talking about Nightwing issue 114 from this past week, written by Tom Taylor with art by Bruno Redondo.
Right. There's no Little Africa in this one, though.
There is not, no.
Right. So the story starts out with a flashback of, Dick Grayson at the circus, climbing for the first time, and maybe things don't quite go as they planned for, a young acrobat. And that kind of ties into how, mistakes were made. And recently he's been having trouble with heights and fear and stuff like that. So now he is on his journey to kind of figure out what that is, and he's on the mountain in present day, if you will, with the dog of his. And there are some great shot, like the way Bruno Redondo does the mountain range. I don't know. I swear to God, Dick Grayson's actually on a mountain, even though it's only drawn. Looks beautiful. Then we kind of get into like 2 weeks ago, and we see what's the name of the villain?
Heartless.
Heartless. As his real name is Shelton. Is he's making his big move to kind of be the head honcho for Bloodhaven, and he gets all the movers and shakers and how he's gonna blackmail them to joining his cause. Spoiler alert, it may involve hearts. And he kind of gets the people that he needs to set up the thing to pull the rug out from under Dick Grayson, because, you know, he basically says it's kind of like the time to tear the heart out of the city, as, you know, Dick Grayson is doing his Nightwing thing, but he can't really do it from the rooftops, which is a nice bit. So we have to watch Nightwing run through the city, which is a different visual that I've never seen before. And, you know, fighting crime doesn't necessarily pan out in this issue the way you would normally see. And then finally, the bit at the end is them at the big gala for the Alfred Pennyworth Foundation, and it's the beginning of Heartless's moves, like even minor ones, talking about he's been seen with criminals on, you know, in pictures and stuff like that, and did they fund the foundation? And finally, maybe someone is attacking the foundation, and what are Bruce Wayne and, you know, Dick Grayson and everybody in their casuals, their street clothes, if you will, going to do. It was an interesting issue for a start, but I will say I felt like reading it was read in 3 minutes or under. But I enjoyed it. But I felt like it was a fast read, but a beautiful read because I was looking at the art most of the time.
Yes, so I got no problem with this being a light book in setting up what the storyline is going to be and what Heartless tries to pull. You know, obviously you had mentioned what he does to get all the crime people on board with him. You know, we get the bit where it's like 2 weeks prior to the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we could talk about it here, where at the whole big gala, whatever it is, there's reporters that go and essentially insinuate that the Alfred fortune that Dick Grayson has used to do all the good work in Bloodhaven is money that he really got from Blockbuster.
Right.
And whether that's true or not, it's, you know, been said in public. So now this is going to be, I have a feeling that this is supposed to be set up as, what was the Frank Miller Daredevil story, Born Again?
Mm-hmm.
Where Kingpin strips Nightwing, or Kingpin strips Daredevil of everything, and he has to kind of like rebuild his empire from scratch, because you can only have Dick Grayson as a multimillionaire for so long before he gets far enough away from his actual roots. You and I talked about this before during the end of the Nick Spencer Spider-Man run, where
right.
Spider-Man became a multimillionaire industrialist.
Iron Man.
Right, he essentially became Iron Man, so it was no longer a Spider-Man comic, even though it had Spider-Man on the cover. You know, obviously Nightwing had to have this happen to him, and obviously it's going to be the tale of how we get there. But this really felt like a throwback, at least in the way that the pacing of the story moved. Not to say, and again, I don't want to say that it was a light comic, but things happened, but the pacing of it was much faster than what we've seen in a typical Tom Taylor book. Mm-hmm. And this very much felt like the old Chuck Dixon Nightwing book, which you could probably sit down and read like the first 50 issues of the Chuck Dixon Nightwing run in an afternoon.
Right.
And not feel cheated, feel like you got like great Scott McDaniel art, you got a great storyline, you got all this character development, excitement, cliffhangers, and everything else like that. But it was just the way that a character, and that's another thing, is that I don't think every character could lend to having a fast-paced story. Obviously, pun intended, The Flash can.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes because The Flash is like a superhero comic, but also like a science comic. Because there's like a lot of like sciencey stuff in there, and like how the Speed Force works. Like it's fake junk superhero science, but it's science nonetheless, right?
Right.
So sometimes you have to slow down and explain some of that stuff. Whereas Nightwing is just a guy who used to be Robin. He's afraid of heights currently. He sees the crime and corruption. He's doing what he can to fix it, and the crime and corruption have found a way to stop him from fixing it.
Right. I just like, and I'm with you. I feel like Nightwing is a character who lends himself to a carefree, lighthearted approach of storytelling because he's not bogged down in the like usually, and every character is going to get that arc or storyline or run. But he being like the circus acrobat and all that stuff. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but all the stuff that lends to what Nightwing is leads to that pace of a book as opposed to other people. I'm with you.
Right. But like I said, last issue was kind of more of a setup. It was kind of more of a reward for the people who have been reading the Tom Taylor run now, however long he's been on the book. I think it's almost like 6 years that he's been on the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And probably closer to 5. But anyway, and this is now the beginning of that storyline. And I think we had talked here that, like, is this going to be the end of Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo on the book?
Right.
Maybe the two of them together on the book, but
right.
It may not be the end of Tom Taylor on the book.
Anytime anybody asks me, I put the emphasis on the "and," Joe.
Yeah. But like I said, I liked it. I'm good. I'm with it. I'm into it. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So while you're over at longboxheroes.com, of course, okay, hang on. So that's what we read from this past week. Let's get into what we're looking forward to coming out this week. If you head over to longboxheroes.com, every Tuesday around noon Eastern time, we put up the pull post, which is a link to all the books that are coming out this week. Whether you get your books in print, whether you get them digitally, whether you get them sent to your home, however it is you get your books, be forewarned, be forearmed, know what's coming out this week. Todd and I attempt to guess what the other is most looking forward to coming out this week. I am currently in the lead over Todd with one correct guess.
Right.
Or are we tied?
No, we're tied by your stats on the page.
Okay, I have to double check and see, because I think I'm supposed to be one ahead, but we'll go by what the stats on the page say. So you started the show, so
I'm looking over your list, and is the book you're looking forward to most finale of Pine and Merrimack, number 5?
Yes, it is the finale of Pine and Merrimack, number 5, and I think that's the book that you're most looking forward to coming out this week as well.
Yes, with the smidge towards Avengers Twilight to see if they stick the landing, but I don't know. We're Kyle Stark's guys, so it's always
for sure
going to be Kyle.
Now, I have to ask, of course, it's not a comic book per se. It's not new material. What's going on in back issue 151 this month?
Like you know what back issue magazine is. Not
right.
Trying to be funny. Like,
oh, no. But, like, obviously there's usually like a theme to the issue.
Right. I don't know what the whole theme is, but there is a giant chunk on just Neil Gaiman Sandman, which might be half the magazine.
Oh, okay.
And then some other stuff. I don't know what it was, but when I even flipped through it to see what was in there, I was like, oh my God, whatever's going on with Sandman and Neil Gaiman just keeps going on and on and on. And it had a nice cover and everything like that. So I was going to grab it regardless. And that's going to be a nice just lay down and, fall into the dream world, if you will, pun intended.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't sure like who the subject of the issue was,
Right. I'm sorry. Like I wasn't trying to, belittle you. I don't know how many people know about Back Issue Magazine, because it's one of my favorite magazines when it hits a subject that I really like, but I never hear, like, we never talk about it. So I'm like, does he know? Do you know what I mean? So I didn't mean anything by that,
I know.
Gotcha.
So while you're over at longboxheroes.com, of course, be sure to check out past episodes of this podcast, past episodes of Longbox Heroes After Dark, and, of course, our current ongoing Todd and Joe Have Issues, as we are reading Gail Simone's Secret Six from the beginning. Went through all the Villains United stuff, went through the Birds of Prey stuff. We're into the main story. We're into the 30-some-odd issues that runs the 3 years plus with a couple crossovers. We're reading an issue a week. and we are currently on issue 5. And I mentioned a little bit in the write-up, of course, and I mentioned, of course, at the top of the show, this falls into DC doing a thematic month of Faces of Evil books.
Faces?
The Faces of Evil, where all of the books this month have this similar look, where there's a character who's in the book whose name gets highlighted over the actual title of the book. It's a black background. It's like, a 3/4 shot typically of the character focusing on the villains. And this was every issue of every book of every DC comic this month. And I miss DC doing stuff like this. We talked before about doing like the variant covers having a theme.
Right.
But I miss the days when the main cover, the A cover, if you will, would be a running theme throughout the entire month.
Let's not only say that, the A cover, there was no B cover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With rare exceptions, would something have, they may have variant covers, but I would say at this time in comics, they would be all tiered, like, 1 of 25, whatever it was. So when you went to the DC section, well, if you had the books in a DC section, or even if you had them in all alphabetical order with Marvel and Independent mixed in, these covers would pop out because they all looked, and I don't want to say exactly the same, they looked, similar, and it'd be like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I was the same way, because I remember when they did we have the Faces of Evil here. Remember when they just did the headshots of them and stuff like that, and they would do various stuff. And I'm with you. I loved a themed cover, especially when it was only one cover per each book.
Yes, this goes back to like when, oh my God, we're coming up here shortly. We're going to be talking about it on Previewing the Past. Where I think it's like late 94, maybe early 95, where after DC does the zero, where the entire month is the zeros.
Right.
Marvel does the entire month where they're -1s.
Yes.
And then they start getting into those thematic cover things where, like, obviously, I think you just mentioned, like, the one where it's just the close-ups of the heads of people.
Right.
That gets into more, like, late 95 into 96. And, it's a almost 30-year-old tradition that I wish would come back.
Right.
So let's get into this issue.
Sounds fair.
So we last left, of course, everybody got separated up, and by everyone, I mean Bane got picked up by Junior, and the rest of the Secret Six got poisoned by Cheshire. And now we get to see how everyone is dealing with these. Now, Jeanette essentially is, we get to see her, in action, no nonsense, big threats to make Cheshire give them, the rest of the six, the antidote to the poison.
Right.
And we get Deadshot as the talking head. And again, I think it's coincidence whether, Gale made the decision that, like, okay, we're going to put Deadshot featured on the cover. Let's have him be the primary voice that we hear throughout this issue. Okay, synergy. I like it. It's okay. But this issue primarily is more of the first time that we get to see the people work as the rest of the six work as a team, even though not at first, even after some stumbling from the previous issue with them bickering over the card, the Get Out of Hell free card. Mm-hmm. But it's all to go save Bane from the horrible fate that he is facing at the hands of Junior.
Right. And I'm with on the Deadpool because it's a giant chunk of it. Because it's either told from Bane's point of view, which is the smaller parts of the issue, and or Deadshot. And I do like the bit where he's discussing about being with this group of losers, and he gets to the line at the end. He's like, well, why would I stay with this bunch of idiots? Well, it's because in the end, I'm an idiot too. And I love the fact that it's like, oh, is he being genuine, or is he playing them or whatever? But I was always a sucker for Deadshot, so I'm all over him in this issue. And I like that we also get Shark in this, But that's not the most famous shark that might ever show up in here. So
no, for sure.
Right.
I do like the bit where obviously after Jeanette's staff, wait staff, food service staff, whatever, are also highly trained whatevers. They get into the firefight with all the goons that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Deadshot who says, like, you would just have your staff open fire while, like, innocent people are around. And Jeanette essentially says, like, oh, yes, because gambling addicts are in short supply. If I get rid of these ones, there won't be more to take their place at a later date, right?
Which is a great bit, yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, like I said, I really feel like it's one of those weird things where we as readers, right, so much of we get the bit of Deadshot, but so much of the inner monologue of this issue is to Bane as well, to kind of like, his rules for dealing with the enemy, right?
Right.
So we have that, and I feel as though we as the reader have that luxury to see what Bane is going through and see his inner monologue, and then we get that satisfaction knowing that Bane's intentions are pure, that he is willing to sacrifice himself for the rest of the team, where he's the newest member, and then after some cajoling, they finally make the decision to come to save him.
Right. It's almost like Gail knows what she's doing. Because there's a bit like with Deadshot, with Scandal in the group, and they do the vote, and it's all the thumbs down but Scandal.
Yeah.
And then Scandal's like, we're going. She ends up muscling it into it. And you're like, oh, that's cool. But also, Bane is, chained to this beam at a construction site with Junior and the twins, and we're seeing it from his perspective. And I'll just say, like, Junior counts out the bricks in the pile, and there's a few short, and he's going to throw them at Bane until he runs out of bricks. And he keeps asking them, your buddies or you? They die or you die? They die or you die? And there's the bit, the same way Scandal's coming to save Bane, he thinks about it, and he thinks about Scandal's head on his knee and him, like, stroking her hair in a lovingly fatherly fashion. And at this point, we're definitely, like, nothing creepy about it. And he's like, I die. I choose that I die. If that's your ultimatum. And because of what he did, that's probably why Scandal's coming back for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's that bond there now, even though it's quick. And whether you can agree with it or not that it wouldn't happen that fast, I'll let people argue. But I'm like, it's written in there and it works for me. And guess what? If I'm the one reading it, all it does is have to work for me. And then the bit where we go back and forth between stories and they come back and Bane is like, oh, here we go. And Junior's like, oh, I forgot my count. Why don't you just give up your people? And he's like, and he gives them the correct count, and he's like, start throwing bricks. To me, that got Bane over as a Secret Six member just as much as, not outing them because he likes Scandal. It was brilliant. Made me love Bane, like, at this time as we were reading this book. When I didn't read Nightfall, I didn't read anything with Bane before this, so I could give two anythings about him. But this issue... He is a member of the Secret Six.
Yep. And spoilers, he would be pretty much until the very end. And, right. We talked early on that this book is essentially made to redeem Bane and make him a three-dimensional character. And I'm kind of sad that he was kind of washed away after Nightfall. And I'm also kind of sad for I don't think Bane has been a prominent character in a DC book since this.
No, I don't. I mean, there was that Joker storyline recently, which was, I'm sorry, it was the Commissioner Gordon book with the serial number filed off that they called the Joker. He was running around in that, remember?
But even that was like 2 years ago, and that was the first time Bane had popped up in anything in at least a good 4 to 5 years.
And then they were doing that to push new cloned daughter Bane.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal. And it was like, oh, I'll just use Bane. I'm good with Bane.
Yeah. Now, Todd, we have the end of this book.
Yes.
Do you have the book in front of you by chance?
I have my digital copy, yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna start. Do you want to be Ragdoll or do you want to be Catman?
I will be Ragdoll.
All right. So they show up to save Bane. And Junior is there, and Junior ends up calling Ragdoll by his shoot name, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
So you're Ragdoll. Go ahead from after that moment.
Yes. Well, Father always did like you best, and your voice has changed.
Father? Wait. You don't mean to tell me, Ragdoll, is this murdering rapist psychopath your brother?
No, Thomas, I'm afraid not. He's my sister.
And then we get a full page shot of the full reveal of Junior out of the gimmick in all of their naked glory. And again, I can't imagine if you've been reading the book up to this point and you see that, you're like at this point, at this point, you know the book is for you or for not, right?
Yeah.
At this point, when this final page comes up of Junior in all of their glory, you're either completely in or you're completely out.
Yes. And as we say, Junior with a disgusting face before you get to all the glory. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's your eyes are drawn to the head area, not the rest of it. And then there is a strategically placed word balloon and hand and shadows. It's very, this is, either you're staying on the bus or you're getting off, Joe.
And we talk so much about Nicola Scott's art in this book and the beauty in the grotesqueness of everything that she draws is amazing.
Yep. Poor Junior.
Yeah.
And you know what it made me think? Did Ragdoll know that it was his sister? Because there's a couple of times where they're telling the story and they're saying Junior. And then they're like, oh, this person runs the West Coast with just in a box with a tablet and a pencil and a telephone. And it's like, there's a couple of shots where you see Ragdoll's face, like, And then at one point, Tarantula is telling the whole story, and Ragdoll is gone for the ice cream truck, so it's missing very important clues to who Junior is. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I always wondered, and that's one of the questions I love to know, like ask Nicola Scott, like when you did the reveal of Junior, did Ragdoll know beforehand?
I don't remember if we get dialogue in there, but I would like to think that it's not until this moment that we find out when Ragdoll finds out, right?
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But we got issue 6 next week.
Yes, we do.
The reread rolls on, right?
Mm-hmm. It's so tough to keep track of what issues we're reading, Joe.
We got until about... let me look at the read order here, which is in the post.
Right. It should be pretty straightforward.
If I do my gazintas here, and hang on, we got another 10 weeks before we need to take a detour.
Right. And then even then, it's not hard,
It's not very hard, right? So plugs, of course, shirts and pins and stickers. Shoot me an email. We'll get them out of my house. We'll talk, right? TeePublic sale just wrapped up. You can make any and all of your eBay purchases through our eBay affiliate link. This page contains affiliate links for eBay. We may receive a small commission on purchases you make. You can use this affiliate link anytime you want to buy anything on eBay and support Longbox Heroes, this show, at the same time.
Right.
But the best and most important way to support us and support the show is to sign up for the Patreon over at patreon.com/longboxheroes. For as little as $1 a month, you're going to get 2 bonus shows from Todd and myself. One, of course, is Previewing the Past, where we look at 30 years ago, this month's previews catalog. We are going to be recording June 1994 in about 2 weeks, give or take. We also have comic book oddities, where we're looking at some of the lesser known, more maligned TV pilots, TV movies, kind of a pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe thing, even though some of the post-Iron Man stuff does slip in. Marvel comic book movies and TV shows and so forth. We just recently watched the sci-fi original Man-Thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn more about the band that does the credits over, or the theme song over the credits, than we do really about anything else.
Yes, that's the deep dive in that episode.
Yes. $5 a month is going to get you those 2 bonus shows 2 weeks before everyone else. It's going to get you Longbox Heroes After Dark 2 days before everyone else, so you can listen to the shows in the correct listening order. And any tier that you sign up for, of course, you are going to get the full scans of those previous catalogs that we talk about on Previewing the Past. High quality, expertly done scans of those previews catalogs, with the Marvel previews coming soon as well. Ugh. When Marvel slips away from the Diamond catalog and it's in their own separate thing, we have 98% of those as well.
Right.
But
and that's pre-scanned, which the scanner loves. So,
and that's 1995's problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2025's problem, whatever.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Yes. Speaking of which, perfect segue. Let's get into discussion of the latest episode of Doctor Who. Todd mentioned at the top of the show, entitled 73 Yards. I'll let you start things off since you're the Doctor Who man.
Right. 73 yards, 219 feet, 66.7 meters, Joe. But it starts off, the Doctor and Ruby land in Wales, and they're looking out at the ocean. And in an interesting bit, before I even get into the episode, no opening credits, no theme song. I don't know if you noticed that, Joe.
I did not.
Right, which is the first time in 60 years and a bit it's ever been done, that they've just ignored, didn't put the theme, anything, which kind of was very interesting. And I wonder if they were going for something there, but we'll see in the next couple episodes. So they land in Wales, and they are, looking out, discussing, and he's like, oh, we're in Wales, I just know it. And he's like, a lot of good stuff in Wales, well, except for Roger Ap Gwilliam. And he's like, oh, he was a prime minister out of there, and he almost started a Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust. He's like, wait, what year are you from? He's like, 2024. And he's like, that's 40 years from now, spoiler alert. He's like, okay. And he ends up stepping on this circle thing with like bird skulls and string and cotton and notes. And they're like wondering what it is. And there's scrolls in it. And Ruby reads some of them. They're about Mad Jack. And the Doctor kind of disappears. Like, she can't find him. She goes to the TARDIS. It's locked. Huh. You in there? And she's like, blah, blah, blah. So she's like, well, maybe, this is the way you are. I don't see you. Like maybe you go run through companions kind of a deal. She's like, well, I'm going to go find a place to see what's going on around here, because she can't get back into the TARDIS. And then she sees this old lady, and she's trying to talk to the old lady. And every time she tries to get near the old lady gets further away. She can't really figure it out. So she starts walking. The old lady's kind of following her, seems to be at the same distance. And then she runs into a hiker, who's the actress who's been in all the episodes so far. And they
more on that later.
Yep, right. Talking to her, and she talks to her. She's like, I seem to recognize you. She's like, I don't know who you are. And she's like, she talks to her. She says, well, when you see that lady, could you go tell her? Like that, like, I'm sorry, like, you don't have to follow me, kind of a deal. And if you see the Doctor, let me know. So the old lady goes off and sees her, and she talks to the old lady, and she runs off just terrorized. It kind of freaks Ruby out. So she goes to this town. She ends up finding a pub and goes in. All the regulars are there, and she's talking to them. And I like that they give her a little bit of the rib, like when she asks them, like, how she's going to pay. And she's like, with your magic phone and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, they think we're all rubes out here, so this and that. And
I did like the bit of how rude all the townspeople were.
Right.
but how they were kind of sort of all in on the joke as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't really think that Ruby was carrying that sort of air that they put on her.
Right.
That, you know, all out of towners think that we're like, think that we're all like witches and warlocks and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ruby didn't really seem to be coming off that way. So
Right.
it was really interesting that they all kind of banded together to be extra mean to her, who arguably is probably the nicest person ever.
Yeah, and I will say that's just the bit, like, to me with the phone. And then she says she stepped on the circle, and they start running into the explanation of the circle and who Mad Jack was. And I will say in the scene as it goes on and the music gets more ominous and the close-ups are on the people's faces and the one punk kid's like, Mad Jack, he's coming. And you know, he killed me first. And blah, blah, and the story's getting more and more wild. And I genuinely got creeped out by it. And then they're like, that's Mad Jack at the door. And she opens up the door and it's the pastry man. And they proceed to tell the bit like, y'all think we're witches and supernatural people. And I'm like, that was a really good a gotcha, if you will. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And she's staying at the place, and one of the regulars is going home. She says that person's still out there, and they go out, and he talks to her, and he runs away. And then the next day, like, he called in and said, like, I won't go, like, I won't come back until, you know, ask her. She's like, so I'm talking to you. And I'm like, I don't think he means me. I think she means her. And the lady's still out there, like, doing gestures and just far off in the distance. So they kind of, you know, established that she stays for a while. And then she's like, okay, I guess you've abandoned me. And she goes home. Like, she rides the train home. And there's that cool shot of every once in a while she'll look out and the old lady's the same distance from the train. It's kind of creepy. So she gets home and she meets her mother and her grandmother and explains it all. And it's like, I never really trusted him with that magic box. And she's like, all right, I'll help you out. We'll do the bit where I'll go down and talk to her with my phone and you stay away, like, so, because she can't get closer or further, and we'll figure this all out. And the mother goes, and through a series of events, you know, the phone gets freaky, can't really hear her, and then she ends up, you know, talking to the old lady, and then she looks at Ruby and runs away in terror, which freaks Ruby out, and she chases her and sees her go away, and then the grandmother's like, what happened? I don't know. And when she goes for groceries one day, she comes back, the mother has come home and changed the locks and won't answer her phone. And Joe, this is when I realized the tragedy of this episode in a good way, is that all these people are abandoning Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruby's a character who has abandonment issues because of being, like, left by her mother. And I give the actress who plays it, like, kudos. Her sitting outside the house begging her on the phone to have her mother let her in, that scene hurt me in, like, a good way. I was like, that was a very, very, very powerful scene.
So up to this point in the episode,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of Doctor Who nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
It's silliness, dance numbers, joshing around, goofing, silly remarks, smiles. I realize I haven't had a lot of smiles so far this episode, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a bummer of an episode, right?
Right.
And it was at this point I'm like, okay, maybe things are a little bit more serious than a fun goofing around Doctor Who episode.
Right. They can be very, like, you know, dark at times.
Uh-huh.
So they jump a year into the future. She's got her own place, kind of a deal. And that's when she, like, finally gets the idea to call UNIT. And the head of UNIT, Kate Lethbridge Stewart, who you've seen before at least, and she's been around a long time in the Doctor Who kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'm glad you called us. And she gives the info dump of, like, yeah, we help, you know, his former companions. And you feel, and it's the bit, she goes through all the bits, even though she doesn't understand the situation. It's like, after you've traveled with the Doctor, even though Ruby's only traveled a hot second with him, is that's the way companions feel. It's like, I've seen the universe. I've been with the Doctor. He's amazing. I've seen stars and aliens and other worlds in the past and the future. And now I'm living in Cardiff. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a different feeling. And she goes through it all. And she's like, yeah, and the world has changed since he's been around. And we kind of know he's gone. And then she says something that jumps out at me as a longtime Doctor Who fan. She says, and the spike in, we handle alien threats and science fiction threats. And more and more recently, supernatural threats.
Uh-huh.
And Joe, before the bit where the Doctor, David Tennant, was at the end of the universe and he did the thing that broke the rules, never has it been supernatural in an episode. It was never. If it was a vampire, you found out it was a bloodsucker from another planet. If you thought it was a mummy, they were really robots wrapped in gauze. Never supernatural. And now they're straight up telling me, as a Doctor Who fan who always kept my supernatural and my Doctor Who separate, that I better get used to it because it's coming back. I wasn't a fan of that, but I really like this episode, so I'm going to let it go. You know what I mean? I just find it interesting that now I have to, after 60 years, I have to get used to supernatural.
And Ruby mentions that, like, oh, well, you know, supernatural stuff. And she goes, oh, don't worry. All the people that are here, you know, not only are they trained in, like, all the, like, psychic blockers and this, that, the other thing, they also have all the talismans and silver and charms on just in case it is supernatural.
Yeah. And she's like, yes, you're right. It is 73 feet. And I like the fact that she has the app on her phone, which they do have, like, so you can measure off distance and everything. And they establish that even at 73 feet's the exact, like, distance at 20/20 vision, somebody's going to be blurry.
Yeah.
And if they use a, like, telescoping lens and everything, like, you take a picture, she's still blurry. I'm like, okay, that's a cool fact. We're not going to see who she is. So they send in the unit things, and and she's like, do not engage. And they talk to her, and they all, like, flee in terror. And they, like, apparently maybe they tell Kate something in her headphones, or they're all connected, and she runs away, which, once again, for somebody who has abandonment issues, now your last hope. Like, the thing that fights the monsters in the night's like, see ya. She basically gives up, and they show her roll out another, like, 2 or 3 decades with a nice thing of the birthday cards appearing on the windowsill, so you know how long it's been. And she's going out on the dates, and they're talking to her that they're checked out because you're not really paying attention. And as they're saying that, she's, like, looking at the woman off in the distance. All really great bits, right?
Yep.
And then while she's sitting there, she sees the news that it's been 40 years, like the Doctor has said, or however long. And that Prime Minister is running, and he's the one who, you know, it brings the world to the brink of nuclear destruction.
Right. It's 2046. It's Roger Ap Gwilliam.
Yes.
Which is, like, a very dumb name. But, oh, you know what? We kind of did miss one thing here. So, obviously, you know, you mentioned about the actress. The old lady actress who has appeared in every episode as a different character. And she was the hiker in this episode.
Right.
The first time that we saw her, she was the neighbor of Ruby's.
No. Different actress.
Oh, that is a different actress. Okay, I thought that was the same old lady. My apologies.
Right. So, yes, and I forgot to mention, she shows up. So you have Twist. That's her. The actress's shoot name is Susan Twist, which I think is just a whole play on, especially with the song, there's always a twist at the end. Mm-hmm. So they're leading you to believe that she's somebody more important, but it's actually this neighbor who's only going to make, like, 3 appearances.
Gotcha.
But she shows up and stuff like that. So I don't know who it is, but
all right. So back to Roger Ap Gwilliams.
Yes. So he's running, and this is when she realizes this is what I'm here for. Like, whether or not we believe it, this is what she's here for. And it gives her moment of strength. Like, all right, whatever, this is at least what I'm going to do. And she has a mission now, a focus, a reason. And this is the Ruby that I like. And she goes and she volunteers to work for them and basically says, I'll do anything. I'll carry the codes. And she she gets in good, and she goes to like the meetings and stuff like that. And I love when they go to the interview on the news, and he basically is just saying that he wants to launch a missile, and he's like, "You'll edit that out." You're like, Joe, I'm starting to think this guy's a bad guy. You know what I mean?
And
go ahead.
And we get the bit here, not to interrupt you, if you were going to mention about Marty, the other girl that's part of his staff.
Yes. And Marty, he shows an interest in Marty.
Uh-huh.
And a creepy interest. And then the next time we see her, she's broken.
Yeah, she's shook. Something bad has happened to her, but she can't leave.
Right. And I love the fact that, like, Ruby's talking, and it's like there's something evil about him. And she looks Ruby straight in the eye and goes, "He's a monster." And Joe, that's all I need. I don't need an explanation. I don't need a backstory. In that 2 bits of him wanting to launch a missile and her saying that he's a monster, we full on know we have to take him down, kind of deal. Great storytelling. So she's trying to put it all together. Then she realizes that, you know, he kind of wins and he's going to do his speech. And this is when they're going to get the missiles from somewhere. And he's going to make the announcement. She's like, well, now's the time I got to stop. And it's on a big soccer field. They tell everybody, don't go out in the soccer field till it's time. And she's like, I figured it out now. And she takes out the phone and she does the, what do you call it? The distance thing. Measure, yeah. And she starts measuring the distance from him. And it's like 60 feet. And in a tense moment, because all it is counting off. She's not supposed to be on the field. And all the security guards are telling they're going to shoot her. And she has to get to 73 feet. Joe, my heart was in my throat because it was so awesome. And that's when she gets to 73 feet. And this old lady gets to talk to him and terrifies him, and he runs, Joe, and that's the end of his storyline. That's how we beat him. And then she's trying to like, well, I did it. The old lady's going to go away, and it's the rest of Ruby's life with the old lady standing off in the distance, and she's like, oh, well, you're not gone, until she's close to death in the old folks' home, and she gets closer and closer, and we realize that it's Ruby from the future. Like old Ruby was telling young Ruby something, and she figures out what it is, and it's don't step on the thing, the
fairy circle.
The fairy circle. And somehow she goes back in time, and the doctor's there, and she stops him. She realizes everything. And she stops it, and this ends up, you know, breaking the loop, and things are left. Like, you know, people are mad because it doesn't explain everything. I'm like, I don't care. This was a perfect episode. This was a fantastic episode, and I don't need everything explained. And maybe by the time the season's over, we'll figure out what's going on. Because even Ruby says, like, when she's talking to her old stuff, she's like, I got old, and it never snowed again since I lost the doctor, kind of a deal.
Right. She says, as an old lady, she says that to the nurse. Right. And the nurse is like, I'll be right down the hall. And she's like, no, you won't. You'll be gone. Everybody always leaves me. And then she says the thing about how she used to be able to make it snow all the time. Mm-hmm. And the nurse is just like, okay, that's crazy old lady talk. Mm-hmm. But we, as the watchers of this, see the last time that Ruby makes it snow is when her mom locks her out of the apartment.
Yep.
And Ruby doesn't get to see it because she's inside, but we, and I want to say the readers, but we, the viewers, see the snow, and that's the last time it snows.
Right. And then we kind of see, like, you know, that it goes, and now they're going to go off and do their, you know, they're traveling again.
Right. And I was going to say, so we get the bit where it replays the beginning of the episode. Young Ruby, current day Ruby, sees the old woman. We, the viewers, know that the old woman is in the distance is old Ruby come to the current day time to warn young Ruby not to step in the fairy circle, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a couple things about that. I watch these shows with the closed captioning on. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Me too.
It helps me focus. It helps me keep notes. It helps me keep names straight. I'm an old man. Right?
Accents is a big thing.
Yes, they're in Wales, Cardiff. There's only one Cardiff I understand. And it's not any of these ones.
Right.
But at the very beginning, when the old lady first shows up, even before the old lady first shows up, and they're about to step on the fairy circle, the subtitles say "Whisper in the Distance."
Yep. And you can kind of hear it if you're listening.
And if you're ready for it, and obviously by the end of the episode you're ready for it. And obviously once she stops the doctor from stepping in the fairy circle, the old woman is gone.
Mm-hmm.
We got the bit earlier with when Ruby meets up with whatever her name is from Unit.
Kate.
Okay. So Kate is like, okay, I got all your information and everything else like that. And there's a bit in there that she mentions. And if you mentioned it, I apologize. And again, I have it in my notes. Kate says to Ruby that something about your event may have caused a suspended timeline.
Yes.
Okay.
I missed that. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this episode. So.
Right. So obviously this is like how that loop is opened, and then that's how the loop is closed.
Right, which is not the first time she's had an alternate timeline. Because when you go back to the Gnomes one, where they're stealing the babies, they wrap around the coincidence of Ruby, and they go back to the church. They try to steal her at the church when she's left, and she vanishes and forces her way, like makes her way back by sheer will, kind of a deal. So there really is something with timeline, and she's special, if that makes any sense to me. To you, I mean. And I want to throw this. Do you have anything else before I throw this out? I don't want to.
I got a couple more things, but you go ahead, throw out whatever you got to throw out.
Have you realized yet that, okay, we're on episode 4 of this series?
Episode 5, but yes.
Episode 5. 3 or 4 of the episodes start out with someone stepping on something and things going horribly wrong.
Oh.
Ruby steps on a butterfly and turns into a lizard, and they have to fix it. They fix it. The doctor steps on a landmine and has to, fix it. Then they step on a fairy circle, and they have to fix it. It's just, I'm wondering, if it's a theme. Do you know what I mean?
So again, 3 out of the 5 episodes, it feels like more than a theme, right?
Exactly. We're supposed to read something into it. But and that's the only note that I can think of, unless something jogs in my memory book.
So this might be my favorite episode of any Doctor Who thing I've ever seen.
Right.
The reason it is, and it works so much, and again, the Doctor's not in it, and this story works in a vacuum, that it doesn't really need the Doctor to exist.
Right. It's called the Dr. Light episode. All joking aside, Dr. Light. And we haven't had one of those since the Russell T. Davies run. And it was Donna Noble was alone. It was called Right Turn. And usually they were done so that they could double shoot, where the Doctor could shoot. There would be a Donna, Light episode, and there'd be a Dr. Light episode. And they would shoot them back, at the same time with 2 different crews.
Sure.
And then you would be able to speed up production and blah, blah, blah. Well, this one was because Ncuti Gatwa, the Doctor, was still under contract to do the Netflix show. I think it's called Sex Education.
Okay.
And this was the first episode shot. So he could finish up his run on the TV show. They shoot this, then they do all the other episodes with him.
Gotcha.
But you really liked how it worked, and that's good then,
But I can't give it the full 5 stars.
Oh my God!
Can't give it the full 7 stars in the Tokyo Dome.
Oh, what? But it's in the Gallifrey Dome, Joe.
Still not the full 7 stars.
Right? Why?
Do you want to guess how nitpicky I am on this one?
Oh my God! If I'm gonna go a 7-star nitpick.
Yeah.
What is?
So there's 2 scenes. One at the TV station, and one at the football stadium, right?
Right.
And I get why they do it. I understand why they do it. But there's several scenes that aren't matching, where and I say old Ruby, she's like in her 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's wearing glasses, and sometimes the glasses have lenses in them, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
And there's some shots where the light is like, I wouldn't have noticed. Okay, I have problems I've definitely noticed, but I wouldn't have noticed if there were a couple shots where, one in particular, where Roger Apge Williams says the thing about like, oh, well, we can just edit that out. And we get a reaction shot of Ruby, and the lights from the TV studio are reflecting off of her glasses.
Right.
Then we cut to the scene of her when Roger comes up to her and they're having a conversation, and he asks what that girl's name is, and she says that it's Marty and everything else like that. That scene, the glasses don't have lenses in them. Continuity errors. Fix these things. There's no reason a mainstream TV show should be having issues like this.
Could my deep breaths just be my reply?
Can't give it the full 5 stars. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh my God, Joe. I honestly don't know anymore if you're just doing a bit on these things that you find.
I had it in my notes with exclamation points after it when I noticed it, Todd. I wish it was a bit. I wish it was a bit.
Could you highlight it so we could ignore it?
No, I don't have highlighters in here. They were taken all out of my office for that reason.
Oh my God. You're killing me on this stuff. Like the nitpick. And if you I got no fight in this dog.
I don't even mind that, like, they age Ruby up like 40 years, and it's like, oh, she has the glasses now.
And she's still got the smooth alabaster skin of
exactly.
I'm with you, because it's like
I got no problems with that. Right. It's a sci-fi fantasy horror show where no problem. I'm buying into it, right?
Right.
When you cut scenes and some scenes she has lenses in her glass and other scenes she doesn't, I'm like, why are you being so sloppy?
Joe, have you ever thought about sitting down and enjoying things?
Yes.
That's all. Just enjoying things. Like if it's not like they dropped a boom into the scene. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It's just like, maybe it was the way we're shooting this. We need the lights of we want the glasses to capture the bright interview lights. Now, after that, if we leave the lenses in, we have to take any other lights out in post. Do you know what I mean? Like, if that makes any sense. It's probably they have a legit. I don't feel nobody realized they had glasses with lenses and without lenses. There was a reason for it. Whether it's like not a visual thing, just something behind the scenes. Like I'm saying, that they didn't want glare in this scene and they wanted glare in that. And they're like, nobody's going to notice except for the wig man of Scranton.
Wilkes-Barre, but thank you.
Wilkes-Barre, yes.
No excuses.
Okay.
I think that's, if there's anything else you have to say, I think that's a perfect way to end this episode.
Joe, I literally have nothing to tell you.
All right. So, hey, everyone, thank you very much for listening to episode 712 of Longbox Heroes. For Todd, this is Joe saying thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you all here next week.
Remember, be a faucet, not a drain.
You're listening to the soon-to-be-named network, the Lamborghini of of podcast networks.
The Rob is a Longbox hero. The Rob is a Longbox hero. He gives us five stars.